there's a thought most people never dare confront. What if your pain means nothing? What if the hours you've cried, the nights you've screamed into your pillow, the quiet moments where you stared at the ceiling begging for life to make sense? What if all of it echoed into a void that doesn't care? We're raised to believe that suffering has a purpose, that every scar is a symbol of growth, that pain makes you stronger, wiser, better. But maybe that's a comforting illusion, one we've manufactured to survive the unbearable. Because the truth is, pain doesn't guarantee growth. Trauma doesn't always make you wiser. Sometimes pain just breaks you, quietly, permanently. We love stories where people suffer and come out stronger, but what about the ones who never recover? The ones who drift through life, hollowed out and haunted? Their pain doesn't write a redemption arc, it writes an obituary. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've been waiting for the transformation, the revelation, the meaning. But what if that moment never comes? What if the universe isn't shaping you, it's just watching you collapse? You see, we keep trying to assign meaning, because if our suffering is random, if our wounds are pointless, then existence becomes unbearable. So we inject purpose where there might be none. We invent gods, karma, fate, anything to avoid the abyss of senseless agony. But that abyss is still there. And most people spend their lives dancing around its edge, too afraid to look down. Suffering hurts more when it feels wasted. That's why we cling to the idea of lessons. It happened for a reason. It made you who you are. These phrases become emotional anesthesia, but sometimes the reason is, there is no reason. Pain just is. It doesn't always teach. It doesn't always lead anywhere. It doesn't always heal, and that's what terrifies us. Because if your suffering is meaningless, then who are you? You've wrapped your identity in your scars. You've told yourself that everything you endured shaped your strength. But what if it only shaped your weakness? What if all that hurt just made you afraid, bitter, guarded, numb? What if the only thing your suffering gave you was more suffering? The modern world romanticizes trauma. We praise the survivor, but deep down we know the truth. Some wounds don't close. Some people don't bounce back. Some pain doesn't inspire poetry. It just leaves silence. You've probably told yourself the story already. That everything that broke you was necessary, that you had to fall to rise, that the darkness shaped your light. But be honest, have you really risen? Or are you just functioning in the aftermath, calling it strength because the alternative is admitting you're still broken? We carry our pain like it's sacred, but sometimes it's just weight, heavy, paralyzing, meaningless. And that's the cruel paradox. Only when you stop trying to justify your suffering can you begin to free yourself from it. Because maybe healing doesn't begin with purpose. Maybe it begins with acceptance. Acceptance that your suffering might not have meaning. Acceptance that life isn't obligated to reward you for enduring. Acceptance that pain might just be pain. And you, just a passenger in its storm. That thought, as bleak as it seems, is the seed of something strange, something liberating. If your pain has no meaning, then you're no longer bound by it. You don't have to wait for it to reward you. You don't have to shape your story around it. You don't have to wear it like a badge. You can just let it be. Let it sit in the dark corners of your memory, unnamed, unromanticized. Not everything needs to be beautiful. Not every scar needs to be honored. Some wounds are just wounds. And maybe that's okay. Maybe your freedom begins where the meaning ends. But freedom is terrifying because it means there's no map, no narrative, no divine hand guiding your pain toward redemption. It means standing in the wreckage of your life and realizing you might have to build something new, not from the ashes of purpose, but from the raw, cold silence of reality. And silence doesn't tell you what to do. It just waits. This is where most people give up. They return to their narratives. They convince themselves that everything is part of a bigger plan. They need the comfort. They need the story. But maybe you're different. Maybe you're willing to walk without a story, to suffer without needing a why, to feel the weight without turning it into wisdom. That's where real strength begins, in the void, in the quiet, in the brutal honesty that not everything has to mean something for you to keep going. Because life doesn't owe you meaning, and pain doesn't owe you transformation. The only thing you're owed is the choice to continue. And that choice is yours. Now, ask yourself, are you brave enough to keep walking, even if the pain never made you stronger? Are you still willing to live, knowing your suffering might be just a scream in the cosmic wind? Because if you are, then maybe you've already become something more than most. Not healed, not enlightened, but awake. And that is far more dangerous. Awake in a world that never promised you meaning, a world that watches your suffering with indifference, like rain falling on stone. And now, here you are, still breathing, still thinking, still questioning what any of this is for. Most people don't want this awareness. They want comfort, a lie that makes the ache bearable, a philosophy dressed in softness, whispering that everything happens for a reason. But you've stepped past that. You've tasted the silence behind suffering. You've looked into the pit and realized it doesn't stare back, because the abyss has no face, no eyes, no sympathy. It just exists. And so do you. Not because of your suffering, not because it made you better, but in spite of it. You exist in the raw, unfiltered chaos of life, without safety nets, without guarantees, without a script to follow. And yet, that's where something remarkable begins. Not the meaning of pain, but the power of survival without it. If your suffering means nothing, then you're no longer its prisoner. You don't have to worship it. You don't have to narrate it. You don't even have to explain it to anyone. You can simply carry it. Not with pride, not with shame. Just carry it and keep going. We've been sold the myth that pain is noble, that struggle builds character, that endurance itself is virtue. But endurance can be silent, ugly, unseen. You won't always be applauded for it. In fact, the more real your suffering, the less likely the world is to understand it. People only see your strength when you dress it up in stories, when you give them metaphors to digest. But what if you stopped translating your pain into poetry? What if you stopped needing it to be beautiful? What if you stopped needing it to be anything at all? That's the death of the ego's favorite illusion, that pain is your purpose. It's not. It's a condition of existence, the cost of consciousness. And once you stop needing it to justify your life, you begin to notice something else, something colder, quieter, but strangely empowering. You can suffer and still choose. Choose to love. Choose to move. Choose to build. Not because the pain was meaningful, but because you are. You give life its meaning, not the other way around. That's the unbearable truth and the ultimate freedom. No more waiting for pain to transform you. No more bargaining with the universe to redeem your wounds. You walk forward without closure, without explanation, without applause. And that kind of walk, that's not weakness, that's defiance. There's a certain dignity in carrying pain that no one sees, a certain rebellion in refusing to let it define you. Because when you accept that your suffering might be meaningless, and you still choose to live fully, love deeply, and act deliberately, that is power. The quiet, terrifying kind of power. You become something else, not a victim, not a survivor, but a creator of meaning in a meaningless world. You stop asking why life hurt you. You start deciding what to do with the hurt. Will it rot you from the inside, or will it become the soil from which something raw and real can grow? Something unpolished, something wild. Not a garden for others to admire, but a wilderness only you can survive in. And maybe, just maybe, that's more honest than anything you were taught. There's a freedom in letting go of why. Because why is often a cage dressed up as a question. It keeps you searching, obsessing, waiting for the universe to send an answer that will never come. But when you stop asking why, and you start acting anyway, that's when you begin to reclaim your life. On your terms. In your language. In your silence. And maybe your story won't be one people write books about. Maybe your strength won't be obvious. Maybe you'll never fully explain what you've endured. But maybe you don't need to. Maybe real strength doesn't need a spotlight. Maybe real healing doesn't need an audience. Maybe the most powerful thing you'll ever do is simply keep going, knowing the pain might never make sense and still choosing to live with your eyes wide open. There's something sacred in that. Not divine. Not holy. Just honest. And maybe honesty, in a world built on comforting illusions, is the rarest form of courage. So next time you feel the weight return, when the old ache creeps in and the silence begins to scream, don't ask it for meaning. Don't beg it to teach you. Just breathe. Feel it. And then, quietly, keep walking. Not because your suffering made you stronger, but because you did, and no one can take that from you. Even if the pain was meaningless, you weren't. You're the one who survived it. And that, in a world that never promised you a thing, is enough. Keep going. Because maybe the truth isn't that suffering needs meaning, but that you become dangerous when you no longer need it to. And when you reach that state, untethered, unbroken, unrepentantly alive, nothing can own you anymore. Not your past. Not your pain. Not even the void. So walk through it. Alone, awake, unafraid. And let the silence watch you this time. Because you're not asking it for answers anymore. You are the answer. And the darkness will remember that you didn't flinch. This was Philospiral. Keep walking.